Rhythm in prose isn't just about sounding pretty. It's the cadence, the pace, the rise and fall of sentences. It's what makes text move forward and what makes it memorable. Rhythm is created through sentence length, punctuation, repetition, and sound. In other words, it's the heartbeat of writing. Why does rhythm matter? Because it carries more than words. It shapes clarity, grabs attention, establishes authority, and leaves resonance. A good rhythm reinforces arguments, keeps nonfiction from dragging, and guides readers through complex ideas. Without rhythm, even the best content risks falling flat. When we edit for rhythm, one of the first things to notice is whether a sentence stumbles. For example, in addition, when dealing with grief and trauma, co-creativity becomes important. The parenthetical and stop-start phrasing make the sentence awkward when read aloud. Next, pay attention to monotonous flow. Take the line, "We dance with ourselves. We dance with each other. We dance with the world. We dance with God." The problem isn't the parallelism itself, it's that the thought never develops. The rhythm just treads water rather than carrying the reader anywhere. Finally, beware of rhythm disguising meaning. Consider following the calling to become a resident student at Pendle Hill, the Quaker Study Center. Finola lived in Pennsylvania for 25 years, leading a rich, extraordinary life of spirit and ministry. The rolling modifiers and stacked phrases, following the calling, lived, leading, sound lofty, but they obscure the actual point. The cadence masks clarity. Writers fall into predictable traps. Some write endless academic sentences that collapse under their own weight. Others chop everything into fragments until the prose feels robotic. Then there are faux rhythm cliches, those heal the past, build the future lines that sound polished but say very little. And finally, overloaded parallelism, where cadence runs wild and meaning gets buried. Orwell warned us, political language often disguises wind as substance.
Political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. George Orwell, Politics and the English Language, 1946.
For editors, the lesson is clear. Rhythm can hypnotize just as easily as it can persuade. When overdone, cadence turns prose into chant. Memorable, perhaps, but not necessarily meaningful. And what I call faux rhythm often conceals vagueness. The music of the sentence distracts us from the absence of substance. That's why Orwell offered 6 deceptively simple rules. Avoid worn-out figures of speech. Prefer short words over long ones. Cut any word that isn't pulling its weight. Use the active rather than the passive. Skip jargon and unnecessary foreign phrases. And finally, yes, break the rules if following them would produce barbarity. In short, rhythm is a tool, not a virtue in itself. Let's look at a couple of examples of how rhythm can either strengthen or weaken clarity. The first example is a case of what sounds lofty but collapses under inspection. We must heal the wounds of the past, bridge the divides of the present, and build the hope of the future. Every phrase is a stock metaphor, wounds, bridges, hope, that doesn't actually name anything real. Who's wounded? What divides? And how exactly does one build hope? It's a string of abstractions, the kind of rhetorical filler that feels stirring but delivers nothing concrete. The refined version cuts through the fluff. We must face the past, mend the present, shape the future. Each verb is active, pointed, and memorable. The rhythm is still there, but the platitudes are gone. You're left with something sharper and more actionable. The second example suffers from the opposite problem. Instead of hollow imagery, we get sheer repetition. We speak of the grace of God in the calling of the sinner. We speak of the grace of God in the pardon of the sinner. By the third or fourth "we speak of," you're no longer hearing the substance. It's just rhetorical static. From the pulpit, That incantatory rhythm may feel powerful, but on the page it risks numbing the ear. The refined version pares it down to the essentials. We speak of grace that calls, grace that pardons, grace that sanctifies, grace that glorifies. The rhythm remains, but now the cadence amplifies meaning rather than burying it. Both examples show the same principle. Rhythm has power, but only when it serves clarity. Up to this point, we've been talking about rhythm in editing more broadly, how the flow of words can speed up, slow down, or stumble. Now we're going to look at some of the specific rhythmic schemes that show up in writing. Let's start with two of the most common schemes, anaphora and epistrophe. Anaphora is the repetition of words or phrases at the beginning of successive clauses.
Still, the sun was hot. Still, one got over things. Still, life had a way of adding day to day. Still, he thought, yawning and beginning to take notice, Regent's Park had changed very little since he was a boy, except for the squirrels. Still, presumably there were compensations.
That repetition of still slows the pace and underscores the persistence of everyday life, giving the passage a steady, almost meditative rhythm. Epistrophe, on the other hand, is the mirror image. It's repetition at the end of successive clauses.
Don't you ever talk about my friends. You don't know any of my friends. You don't look at any of my friends, and you certainly wouldn't condescend to speak to any of my friends, so you just stick to the things you know. Shopping, nail polish, your father's BMW, and your poor, rich, drunk mother in the Caribbean.
Here, repeating my friends builds intensity and urgency, creating a pounding rhythm that mirrors the character's anger and defensiveness. Here are three kinds of repetition that shape rhythm in different ways. Epizeuxis is immediate repetition.
Our top priority was, is, and always will be education, education, education. UK Prime Minister Tony Blair.
Next is diacope, repetition with a word or two in between.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last!
The break between the repeated words gives it both rhythm and emphasis. Anadiplosis is when the last word of one clause is repeated at the start of the next.
Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Yoda. The Empire Strikes Back.
That chained repetition, the last word of one clause, repeated at the start of the next, creates a sense of inevitability. Two more rhythmic schemes to be aware of are tricolon and isocolon. A tricolon is the rhythm of three phrases or clauses stacked together to create emphasis.
And when the night grows dark, when injustice weighs heavy on our hearts, when our best laid plans seem beyond our reach, let us think of Madiba and the words that brought him comfort within the four walls of his cell. President Obama, Memorial Service for Nelson Mandela, 2013.
That triple cadence gives the sentence a rising, almost musical rhythm that builds momentum and weight. Isocolon, by contrast, relies on balance. It's the use of clauses that are equal in length and structure.
Pity is the feeling which arrests the mind in the presence of whatsoever is grave and constant in human sufferings, and unites it with the sufferer. Terror is the feeling which arrests the mind in the presence of whatsoever is grave and constant in human sufferings, and unites it with the secret cause. James Joyce. The portrait of the artist as a young man.
The symmetry of those clauses reinforces the comparison, pity and terror standing as equals, and the rhythm makes the pairing more memorable and forceful. As an editor, spotting these patterns helps you decide, is the rhythm adding power and clarity, or does it need to be pared back to avoid sounding too heavy-handed? Now let's look at four schemes that shape pacing and sound: polysyndeton, asyndeton, brachylogia, and the periodic sentence. Polysyndeton is the deliberate overuse of conjunctions.
Let the white folks have their money and power and segregation and sarcasm and big houses and schools and lawns like carpets and books and mostly, let them have their whiteness. Maya Angelou. I know why the caged bird sings.
The repeated and slows the pace, weighing down the sentence and mirroring the heavy accumulation of what Angelou is describing. A. Syndeton does the opposite. It omits conjunctions, quickening the pace.
Consciousness of place came ebbing back to him slowly over a vast tract of time, unlit, unfelt, unlived. James Joyce, The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man.
Without the connectors, the words tumble forward, rushing the reader into a kind of breathless rhythm. Brachologia is clipped and staccato.
They'll relate to it well. The ministers, guaranteed. Hagseed, Margaret Atwood.
The brevity here creates a kind of snap, each fragment hitting like a quick strike, leaving no space for doubt. The periodic sentence, by contrast, stretches the build-up before delivering its main clause.
To believe your own thought, to believe that what is true for you is true for all men, that is genius. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Self-Reliance.
The delay draws us through the sentence, layering condition upon condition, until the final word, genius, lands with full weight and authority. To close out our look at rhythm, let's turn to sound devices: alliteration, assonance, cacophony, and euphony. Alliteration is the repetition of initial consonant sounds.
But 4 hours later the fish was still swimming steadily out to sea, towing the skiff, and the old man was still braced solidly with the line across his back. Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea.
That repetition of the S sound mimics the steady pull of the sea, reinforcing both rhythm and imagery. Assonance, by contrast, is the repetition of vowel sounds.
Well, to be truthful, the blueprints simply rage in youthful exuberance. Everybody loves to root for a nuisance, hit the earth like an asteroid. Did nothing but shoot for the moon, since MCs get taken to school with this music, 'cause I use it as a vehicle to bust the rhyme. Now I lead a new school full of students. Eminem, rap god.
Notice how the repeating long ooh sounds tie the lines together. It creates cohesion and musicality even before you pay attention to the meaning. These sound patterns don't just add style, they shape the pace and texture of the prose or verse. To close out our look at rhythmic schemes, let's turn to cacophony and euphony. Cacophony is harsh, jarring rhythm.
I could not forbear shaking my head and smiling a little at his ignorance. And being no stranger to the art of war, I gave him a description of cannons, culverins, muskets, carbines, pistols, bullets, powder, swords, bayonets, battles, sieges, retreats, attacks, undermines, countermines, bombardments, sea fights, ships sunk with 1,000 men. Jonathan Swift, Gulliver's Travels.
The piling on of harsh consonants and militaristic terms creates a rhythm that feels heavy and discordant, exactly right for the subject. Euphony is the opposite. Smooth, flowing rhythm.
I can live alone if self-respect and circumstances require me to do so. I need not sell my soul to buy bliss. I have an inward treasure born with me, which can keep me alive if all extraneous delight should be withheld, or offered only at a price I cannot afford to give. Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre.
The cadence is graceful, the sound soft and measured, giving the sentence a calm dignity. Now, schemes like cacophony and euphony aren't as common in prose or narrative nonfiction as the others we've looked at. They tend to appear more subtly, woven into phrasing rather than standing out as obvious technique. But they're still there, shaping tone and texture, so it's always worth keeping an ear out for them when you edit. There are countless rhetorical schemes out there, but these are the ones most relevant to rhythm. Enough to sharpen your editorial ear without turning this into a crash course in classical rhetoric. Rhetoric has named dozens of schemes, and rhythm runs through all of them in some way. I am showing you the longer list here not so you memorize it, but so you can appreciate how many ways writers have found to shape the sound and cadence of language. The point is not to turn editors into rhetoricians, it's to sharpen the ear. When you edit, rhythm is always there, sometimes obvious, sometimes subtle, sometimes helping, sometimes hurting. Listening for rhythm is part of listening for meaning. And when rhythm works, it doesn't just sound good. It carries the reader exactly where the writer wants them to go.